Welcome back, everybody, to the Flight Path podcast. This is your weekly source for all things Tern news. I'm David Schultz, CEO and co-founder of Tern, joined as always by my two incredible co-hosts, Brad, who's our head of design, and Molly, our head of product. And we've got an action-packed show for you. I've got to do the plug to begin with. If you haven't already, go ahead and click on that subscribe button. We really do believe this is the best way to learn about everything that's happening at Tern. You wouldn't believe how many people tell us, like, you guys are shipping stuff so often, it's hard to keep up. Like, this is how you keep up. So click that subscribe button. And if you feel like leaving a comment, we do read every single one of those. We'd love to see it. But Brad, Molly, welcome back to the show. Happy Friday. Let's talk about the weekend in kind of like review. Molly, what did you do this week?
Oh man, it was one of those weeks that when we were doing our little lightweight agenda for the podcast, I was like, what did I do this week? And turns out it was a lot, as always. We shipped a lot of things. So we're going to talk about all of them, but a lot of my week was just testing and documentation and scouring the Facebook group to make sure there's nothing wrong with the things that we shipped and listening to feedback. So a lot of it was that. And then the other kind of cool thing I've been spending a fair amount of my time on is just kind of taking a step back a little bit and looking at the product as a whole and talking to a lot of users who are newer to Tern or have just kind of reached out with questions on how to even get started, and just trying to assess, like, when you take a step back and you look at all of the features and functionality we offer, it's quite comprehensive and it can be overwhelming for some of those newer folks. So just really trying to like put myself in the shoes of a new user and figure out like what are the key things we can do to just make the platform feel a bit more intuitive and simpler to pick up and get started on, without feeling like even to take the first step you need to watch a bunch of Turn and Learn trainings and that sort of thing. So that's been like overwhelming in some ways, illuminating in other ways, and excited to start to talk on this podcast more about like how that translates into our feature roadmap in the future.
So excited for that. And like you said, lots to unpack there in the future. But I also have to say, like, we learned something new about Molly today, which is the coffee preparation method of choice. And we don't have the visual anymore, but like, what was that thing that you hold up, Molly? And like, how do you make coffee?
Okay, well, I feel almost bad because I thought that we removed this from our scheduled banter, but we do this thing. I mean, I think it's pretty normal. We like grind our own beans and then like we put them in a like cauldron thing and like pour over the top, and it does look like
I've never heard of a Chemex being called a cauldron before.
I was going to say that's a new one.
If you two know how it's done, why don't you explain it?
This is actually, I think, like, yeah, the glimpse into like how people make coffee, I think, is actually like it says a lot, right? Especially if you call it a cauldron. Like, you just learned a lot about Molly's personality in one little section here.
Shots fired, says the person who's working from a golf cart today, according to Slack.
Okay, I'm not working from a golf cart, but I am working from a garage which housed the golf cart, and somebody hid the key, and so I couldn't find the key to get it out. So I'm in Florida this week, and we're visiting. My in-laws have a thing that they do every year down here, and so working from it. And the only place I could find where I wasn't constantly having people like walk through was the garage. So that's why I have a heavily blurred background. You can kind of make out the fridge here. Like, it's very, very glamorous office setup, but it works unless somebody parks the golf cart there. So I sent to Slack being like, I'm going to be a couple minutes late to the podcast because I have to figure out how to get the golf cart out of my office, which I'm sure is the problem that everybody can kind of relate to. But it was just that's my morning. So Brad, let's move on to you.
Well, great start. Okay. Yeah, similar to Molly, like just had a lot going on this week, shipping things. Like Molly mentioned, also starting to engage in some of those conversations about like how do we make the product simpler. Maybe one other cool highlight of the week is we'll talk about this more later today and in future podcasts, but we're like starting to jump back into the AI space, and we had a really fun session earlier this week where like the three of us actually got to like play around with some more AI things and get our hands a little dirty. I won't say that we're like putting on our engineering hat because we have things against putting on hats, but yeah, that's kind of, it's been fun to do a little different type of work this week, like starting to play around with AI. Also, one just on the like random story that's completely irrelevant for the podcast. I flew back from France on Wednesday and flew business class on American on points. We did not buy seats, but it was the flight. The seats were configured where you're like looking backward the whole time. Like it's the configuration where you're like, ups. I don't know. I can't explain it very well, but it was like a cool travel experience. It's like this I've never done before. This is unique, and I didn't hate it as much as I thought I was going to. So maybe advisors out there will relate or know what I'm talking about. But it was odd.
If you fly business, it's like you probably do pour over coffee too, right, Brad?
Yeah. Yes. That's
sure. I've got my peasant drip coffee here. Just it's good enough. That's all I need. It is manatee blend though, so I save the manatees with every cup of coffee that I drink. So
my thing is, if
fancy.
I don't leave the house ever, I might as well have a really world-class cup of coffee every morning. So
straight out of the cauldron. Right. Well, yes. I mean, echo all the things Molly and Brad said around kind of the week. It's been really exciting. Anyway, I think it's been really fun too, just like coming out of wave season. Like we've sort of seen the shift in like, the growth numbers have been really exciting. We have a number of new agency partners that are coming on. Like it's really been kind of a fun month. And we'll kind of talk about next week, which is going to be another kind of, I think, like big event week for us. So a lot of prep for that. And just kind of like a lot of sort of behind the scenes work, things that we'll have more to share on probably in a month or two. But it's been a really, really fun week. And like we said, we've got a lot that we've shipped, and it's some pretty big things that people have been asking for a really long time. And we're going to I think kick off like right away with the biggest update to forms that we've had since we built the product originally over almost a year and a half ago. So Brad, do you want to kind of kick things off on what's new in the world of forms and maybe take us through a little demo here?
Yeah, and before we do the demo, just to kind of like cue it up, when we're talking about forms, like the biggest update we've been fielding requests for ever since I joined more than a year ago has been to have more flexibility on the information you're collecting about travelers when they're filling out a trip request form or when they're initially filling out an interest form. Before, we had like a set of fields. It's like, this is what you can ask. That's all you get. We're going to tell you which ones are required and optional. And like, hope you're happy with it, because that's as much as we can do now. And so we knew what was happening was you'd often have to send that first form and then later go follow up with the more flexible contact form that you could actually ask for, the specific fields that you needed in order to book the trip and do all those things. So we've had this kind of like mental note, like merge the contact and trip forms on our roadmap for a very long time. And it came up even more once we launched group trips, because that one, even more so, you really want to collect all the information at the time of sign up. There's less of a like longer back and forth, like, oh yeah, let's like get some interest and then we'll come back later and get all your details. It's like you just want all that in one go. So we invested quite a bit of engineering power over the last couple of weeks to make this happen and find a way to actually provide that more flexibility from the contact form into the trip request form. Molly, anything to add there before we jump into the demo?
No, let's do it.
Okay, cool. I should have clicked share screen when I asked you that question, but here I am filling time anyways. Okay, great. So just as a quick visual for folks, I'm here on a group trip in Tern looking at the sign-up form that you can customize. And now what you'll see when you go down here, there's a traveler details section, but instead of a set list of fields here that you can't customize, now you can pull in any piece of contact information you want to collect into this traveler details section. For something like basic details, where you collect name, email, stuff like that, you can customize which of those fields are actually required. Like if you want to require an email or a middle name, stuff like that. And then you can customize completely what other information you want to collect. So let's just imagine when I'm filling out or when I'm collecting interest for a group trip, really what I want is, of course, their basic details, but I really want their passport information at the time they sign up. So I can pull in the passport section here, and it will automatically fill in all the fields that I need to collect on a passport. And then when a client goes to fill this out, they will have the ability both to fill out those basic details, to upload a passport, fill out all the passport details, and then if they add multiple travelers, for each traveler on the trip, they'll fill out that same set of information. And so now you can take this, just have one form, collect everything you need all in one go, and you have all the flexibility you can imagine with the different fields that exist on a contact profile today. So super proud of how simple this feels, and we didn't have to like add a new way of interacting with forms. It's still just drag and drop the thing in. You can customize the order and the actual fields within Traveler Details.
And maybe Brad, while you're here, like, just can you just try and drag a contact detail to a part of the page that's not related to the traveler?
Is this a test?
This is, well, it's more of an illustration. So you'll see, like, it doesn't let you put it there, right? And this is where, you know, we've been asked for this, usually, like Brad said, for like, well, it's basically simply built forms. People are like, why do you do this? And so like this is just one micro example of the complexity of doing this, right? Which is like, okay, we need to have the context of what traveler that birthday, that passport, those food and drink preferences are related to in order to actually update the CRM record, right? We don't want this to just be like a generic form with here's all the information. And so literally it's something as simple as the drag and drop area has to be kind of like dynamically calculated to make this work on the form builder side, right? And then we have to have the logic to say, like, you could add one traveler, you could add 100 travelers. How do we render the form in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming? So it's taken us a year plus to do this because it's like actually quite complex. And to Brad's point, like the simplicity that it feels like this was probably easy to build, but it was like the farthest thing from easy. There was logic, there was a ton of back end work, there was a bunch of UX stuff to think about, like, and so it's really fun to see this live. And Molly, I interrupted you, so go over to you.
Oh, I was just going to reiterate. I know Brad said this, but I've gotten this question like 3 or 4 times. It will iterate through each of the fields for every single traveler. So if you put passport in there, traveler 1, passport, traveler 2, passport, traveler 3, passport, so that when you're actually then going to make their group booking, if that's something you need, passport, you have that for each traveler in the sign up experience.
And it's stored in the CRM.
Yes, exactly. And if they already have a contact, it will update it. If they don't have a contact record yet, it will create a new one. So we've got you covered with all of the details you need now.
So cool. And I think it is just talking about in the groups context too, like what this also, and Brad, you said this in the intro, right? But like this actually allows for a one flow. I was gonna say one shot, which is like this like AI term, so it's like very much in my head, but like this one flow booking experience where like you as an advisor will get everything you need because you can customize it now in that registration flow. So you can go from like somebody finding your landing page to making the booking without having any back and forth, or I'd say maybe any unnecessary back and forth with the traveler. But we should also emphasize that this works on any forms, right? So you can build a normal trip request form that's not associated with the group in the same way that Brad just demonstrated. So this is a global update to forms, and it was just really cool how it came together. So shout out to the entire team that worked on this. It is a huge upgrade, and we've already seen like a shocking number of people that have kind of been adopting it, right? I think it's like been pretty fun to see that. So
yeah, maybe one more thing before we move on to the next piece. It's just a behind the scenes look. If you look at our feedback tool, there's all those requests that's like, wait, no, make birthday optional, make birthday required, make passport required on group trip signup forms. And there's this deluge, I don't know, it's not the right word. Basically, this laundry list of like, for my use case, I need Tern to change the way this thing works. And we take all that and we say, okay, well, obviously the answer here is not to like force everyone into this request, but like to actually introduce some more flexibility and customization. So I think it's a good example of like when we will introduce more kind of customization versus just introducing a change that forces everyone to have the same experience.
It's such a good point, right? And this is what I always tell people, right, when they ask for like, well, just make it customizable. It's like, well, customization is directly related to complexity. The more customization that you add over time, the more complex a feature is, which means it's harder to update, which means it's harder to innovate. And so like we have to always thread the needle between like, is there a path that we can sort of just ship one thing and it makes everybody happy-ish, but like you get way more benefits in terms of agility speed, or do you like actually do the customization route, and how do you make that customization route easy? We talked about this, I think maybe it's last week, right? And just like the simplicity of being able to choose which fields are required, right? Like that's actually a lot of thought and iteration and process, because you know to Molly's point, like the more complexity you have, the more somebody has to learn how to do it. And so how do you make that feel intuitive, right? So this was like a whole thing, but really, really think it's cool how it kind of came together in the form space. And it's a good example where it's like, yeah, sometimes you do just have to make things customizable because travel businesses are so different. Um, Super cool. I hope people really enjoy the forums. Like, love to hear in the comments like what you think about the updates and like kind of how you're using it. But let's kind of move on. We've made some pretty big updates on collaboration, which was sort of been a theme as promised. I think we said maybe 2 podcasts ago, like we really want to get to a point where you can really collaborate across the board in Tern. And this week, kind of the major investment area for that was contacts. So Molly, do you want to kind of talk about some of the updates that we made around collaboration and contacts, but also just like making it easier to contacts in?
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, as Brad, I think, talked about in the last podcast, we want anything a collaborator, anything an owner can do of a contact, we want collaborators to be able to do. So if you want to send emails to the contact, if you want to edit relationship information on the contact, like anything that you want to do related to contacts, if you share that contact, you should be able to do as a collaborator. The big step forward there this week is the activity tab. So now if the contact fills out a form or ownership is transferred of a contact or really anything that we log on that tab, which kind of becomes the timeline for the contact over time, you can now see and access as a collaborator. So just another kind of step forward along that path of making sure that you have access to everything you need as a contact collaborator. The other really big update, let's put on our agency owner hats for a second. Oh gosh, I'm doing it too. I think hats is here to
Can't
stay,
escape
Brad.
the hats. Can't escape the hats.
Yeah,
None of us. I don't think I've seen any of us wear a hat, at least like in a professional context. But it's stuck now. We're a hat company.
It's stuck. I'm wearing my agency owner hat. So you're thinking about switching over to Tern, and you have all of your contact data in your current CRM. And in Tern, you know that there's the concept of ownership, right? So each agent might have a set of 100 or 1,000 contacts that they're the primary owner for. You, of course, have visibility and access to, but they're primarily working with that contact. So previously, you were faced with a decision. Do I just kind of export the contacts from my old system and upload them all for my agents so that they don't have to take care of doing any of that themselves and kind of transferring their data over, making myself as the agency owner, the primary owner of the contact? Or do I coordinate, maybe it's 100 different agents, each of them taking their individual list and uploading them in to Tern themselves and making sure that they share them with myself as an agency owner? And a lot of people chose the latter just because it was much more useful to make sure that the right agents kind of own the right contacts. And a lot of that burden fell on our wonderful teammate, Brooklyn, who helped with a lot of this. So she was actually doing a lot of these agency implementations and helping organize that entire process. So shout out to Brooklyn. This feature is like the favorite thing that we've ever shipped of hers. But also is huge for just making this whole thing self-service. So now as an agency owner, you can export that contact list. You can just assign out the agents in a spreadsheet and you can upload it. The other thing that you can do is if you need to transfer ownership in mass, maybe an agent leaves and, you own those contacts as the agency, just assign a different agent to those set of contacts, do the upload again, and transfers them over in mass. So just really saving a lot of time for managing that entire process and making Brooklyn love us as a product team.
We should call this the Brooklyn upload, right? I think maybe that's, that'd be very clear for everybody in product, right? Seeing the that button. But so I think it's also just like fun to think about, the improvement to the agent experience, right? Like when you get the email from your agency being like, hey, like it's time to move to Tern. We've talked on the podcast before about like the library and how you can have email templates and forms, like all these things, almost like a business in the box ready to go. And so as an agent, you can go in, you can start to personalize all that for you. Now, like you log in, it's like, there's all your contacts just like ready to go, right? You don't have to worry about that. Like it's just there, right? And so you can really focus on like, okay, how do I really start to plan trips and like make sure that I'm, kind of learning that part of the system without having to do all this admin. And it's really fun just to keep thinking about how can we build tools that shorten the time to that like magic moment, right? Where there's not all this setup and configuration and data import, but it's like you come into Tern as an agent and it's just like, somebody strapped on like an Iron Man suit or gave you these superpowers, right? Where you're just like, really more efficient. Um, yeah, so that's it. It's always fun whenever I come up with these like random analogies on the spot, which to be fair aren't very good. Watching Brad's face, like it's just one of my joys in life.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was brutal.
So now if you're an avid podcast listener, just pay attention. Anytime there's an analogy, don't look at my little box, look at Brad's box, and you'll be in for a real treat. So anyway, yes, okay. So activity updates, contact collaboration, bulk imports, anything else on that before we move on to a rapid fire other wins section that we've got.
That's all I got.
All right, perfect. Brad, over to you. After that, you want to talk about some of the UX improvements that we've made and some feedback that we responded to.
Love it. I just want to say, David, my goal in life is to like be able to come up with, to at least attempt more analogies on the spot. It's a communication skill I do not have, and I wish to develop it. And maybe we could talk about this more in our one-on-ones. You can give me some tips on the fly now. Okay, so we want to attempt that here, but there are two big things we want to talk about, two usability improvements that we shipped this week. So the first one is around automations. We constantly get people asking, like, wait, did this automation actually run? Like, did this thing happen? Did this email send? Did this task go? Why didn't it go? But like what we found over time was that actually there's just some missing information for you all where like if we provided this in the product, you wouldn't have to reach out to us to ask. You could just see like, oh yeah, this automation did run on this date and I can see that it's working as expected versus having to like go poke around or like reach out to support. So now on a trip or a contact, if you look at the automations tab in the table there, it'll show you not just the next date an automation is expected to run, but when it last ran. So you could confirm if you needed to, like, oh, when the trip was approved, you could see like, oh yeah, the automation that's associated with trip approval did run on X date or whatever that might be. So some more information just to help you and have that peace of mind knowing that your automations are working as expected. And then other one that I'm really, go ahead.
Can I just add, like, I mean, this automation, you said this at the beginning, but like the automation piece, I did a training with some of our new hires this week and I like walked through, we have this like, the AI bot on the support side is supposed to be able to like triage like why an automation or a workflow might not be running. So if you ask, like, if you ever get into this like chat with the AI bot and it's like, please link out your automation, like what it's trying to do is run a whole bunch of checks on like why that automation may not have been triggered. So, fun fact, you can try that. But I was walking through all the things that it's checking with our new hires, and there's like 20 things that it checks. And so, this is fun just to continue to think about like, how do we surface that? How do we continue to do some of those diagnostics like in app? How do we make that feel kind of more understandable? And it's, sometimes this something as like simple as just like showing you the last time that it ran. And so I think it's neat to continue to think about that in this, kind of workflow automation context, which people sometimes can feel like is a little bit of a black box. And so making that more transparent is cool.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's a great way to look at it. It's like what's getting offloaded to the support bot today that we can bring right into the product. So you don't have to even go like find the chat and talk to the AI or a human to deal with that. Okay, one more thing on my side before I hand it over to Molly. We made it seems like a really basic change to the client experience, but it's going to make so many people's lives easier. And I'm so excited about this. Now, if you have documents on a trip or an activity and your clients open the itinerary and they're not logged in or they haven't verified their email yet, they can still see that those documents exist. And so they know to like, if they're looking for a document, they can click on the document tab and it'll say, hey, there's 2 documents here. Just like click view, and then it'll ask them to authenticate. So we know that they actually have permission to view those documents that might include their passport details or confirmation numbers or whatever that might be. But now there's like actually an indicator that the documents exist versus you telling your clients like, oh, go to the documents tab, and they open the itinerary, like, what documents tab? That's not there. And they have to know like, oh, I need to first log in and like verify my email in order for that to show up. Like, we just had the ordering wrong. We can make it so much easier to just say like, hey, give you a preview that this thing exists, give you like a door to open, if you will. You can like open that door and they're like, hey, by the way, we just need to confirm who you are before you can actually see the content. So super like basic design principle of like giving an entry point that people are expecting and it's finally there. So hopefully we'll save a lot of confusion for folks who are having struggles with their clients not knowing how to find documents.
And I think this is also so fun, right? It's like one of those changes that hopefully, like, I don't know that people necessarily ask for that specific thing, but what we hear is like my clients can't find the documents, right? And so like, solving that hopefully like lowers the kind of burden on advisors. One question we sort of get, and I think listeners of the podcast probably already know this, right? But like people will ask, like, why do you have to have this kind of identity verification to access documents at all, right? And what we've seen is that a lot of these documents contain pretty sensitive information, right? Everything from the last four digits of a credit card to like confirmation numbers to PNRs, where like if you have that PNR, like you could go and change somebody's airline ticket. And if these are sort of open and just discoverable on the internet, right, there's like a pretty big risk for fraud, for people finding this. And like we take multiple steps from hard to guess URLs, but to like this identity validation step where it's super simple. It's like, here's an email with 6 numbers, you can just type in or you can click on the link and it'll validate it. And now we know that they should have access to those documents. And so again, we think this is one of the biggest selling points of Tern, is that you're a travel advisor, like you're dealing with a lot of really sensitive information, and some of the systems out there bias, but like I don't think have actually like taken the responsibility to help come alongside you as an advisor to protect that really sensitive client information that you're in charge of. And we try and take that really seriously. So whether it's documents, whether it's credit card authorization, whether it's like double encryption on passports, like this security and data privacy and protection is something that we think is absolutely paramount. Because the last thing you want as an advisor is somebody calling you and being like, hey, like my identity got stolen or my flights just got canceled or changed to somebody else, because you didn't have protections around the documents or whatever it may be. So I think that's really cool. And like with that comes this obligation to say, like, how do you make that as easy on the client as possible? So really, really cool to have this out.
Awesome.
All right.
So
We're not done. Molly.
No.
Yeah.
We have engineering demos every week, and this week, every single update, we're like, oh my God, we've been wanting to fix that forever. So really, really another set of fun ones that I have. The first actually, we didn't add to our agenda, but popped into my head. So our engineer, Andrew, who's like all over the Facebook community, he's a travel advisor himself. He's just like so customer centric. He was doing support engineering this week, where he kind of, the engineer kind of pairs with our support team to make sure that issues are resolved quickly. And he was like, yeah, this user hit this issue where every time they go to publish a trip, they have to delete the best their name from the preloaded template that we share. And she was like, but they have a signature stored in settings. So like every single time they have to delete best name so that their signature will show and it won't show duplicate. So he's like, can we just detect if the signature is stored? And then just for users that the signature is stored in their settings, we don't put best name. And I was like, yes, of course. That's like the best thing ever. So he just took it upon himself to fix that. And then I think like 30 seconds later in the Facebook community, someone was like, yay, I just noticed that it doesn't do best name anymore. So just like a really cool win, and just wanted to shout out Andrew, not only just like removing that for everyone, which might make the experience slightly worse actually for a lot of people, but doing it in a smart way that it's like, if you have the signature stored, then we just in that case remove the best name. So shout out to Andrew. I know he actually listens to the podcast. So hi, Andrew. So that was a cool one. Another one, we got kind of an urgent SOS from this user who is building out a lot of really great content, I think, and was having an issue where she, took the time to attach all these important documents to her itineraries to then save as an itinerary template, but the documents weren't saving. And the original impetus behind this, I think, was good, right? You don't want to accidentally save an itinerary template with documents that are specific to a client, for example, and then use that itinerary template with another client and not realize. So same theme, basically, of trying to protect security. But, if you know for a fact that the documents matter across the template, we now kind of have a little checkbox option that you can preserve those documents. So that should go a long way, so you're not having to then manually upload the documents again anytime you're creating a template. And then the final thing is one that we've heard basically since we released credit card authorization. And this is one I think we kind of missed on when we first released it, where, after clients authorize their credit card, if it expires, if that authorization expires after 30 days, you can reset it if you need to collect that authorization again. But if it's an active authorization, we didn't include any way to reset it. And there are cases where you may want to. Maybe the client uses a credit card and they actually want to use a different credit card, or just other examples like that. And we're like, hey, we don't really need this in scope initially. You can just kind of tweak the price back and forth and it will reset it automatically. So you should be covered. But then we launched installment payment schedules and we launched partial payment schedules. And it turns out for those types of schedules, if you reset the price to tweak it to reset authorization, it clears out all the other ones, right? So it just kind of became this massive pain for folks when they needed to do that, and often actually would reach out to our engineering team for them to, on the back end, basically reset it so that they don't have to go through that burden of doing all those changes themselves. So Kayla, who's newer on the engineering side, actually dug into this week. And like, shout out to Kayla. Anytime you touch payments, it's like 10x harder than you think it will be. But another one that was really fun, where we launched the ability to reset authorization status, and like literally 30 seconds later, it was like, yay, I was just trying to, do this and I noticed it, and someone posted in the Facebook community, and Kayla got to see that too. So it was just a fun feedback loop of how anxiously awaiting this feature people were.
I think that's so cool. And it's also just like, I was actually, we do this thing at now called like donuts, which is like you get randomly paired with people across the company. And my donut this week was with Kayla, and we were talking about, the Facebook group, we were talking about the webinar. And she's like, it's really cool having come from like a bigger company to like see this sort of real time impact on users, right? And so, we talk a lot about the Facebook group here. Like it is really neat when people post that, right? And like it is super validating and super motivating for our team. So I know people do it for the community and to help people discover things. Like forums was another good example. Somebody posted that, and it like, I think Chloe was like, "Oh my gosh, like the Tern team sent it again." She was a little cryptic about it, and everyone's like, "What they do?" And like that's really fun, and it is really, it's just really cool, right? I mean, I think like as humans, it's just nice to know that like the work that you're doing makes an impact, and so grateful for this community to like to all of you that do take the time to be like, hey, like this thing does matter. This has made a difference. Because it's motivating, and it keeps the team super focused on like how do we keep shipping things at the speed that we are. So thank you for that. Thank you for the team who's able to actually kind of like take that motivation and execute in a pretty incredible way. Like podcasts like this week, so it's just like kind of fun to take a step back and be like, this was like 5 business days of work. Not even, because we're recording this on like Friday morning. And that's a little bit of an oversimplification because there's tons of input that goes in beforehand. But like just the amount of stuff that we ship every week is, I think, is really cool. And it's just kind of fun to be able to like do a 30-minute podcast where we're like, here's everything that got done in it. And it's like, we'll do it again next week and the week after and the week after. Right. So feeling excited about that. And I think we have covered all the updates though, I think, right? Like open space here before I move into week ahead. Anything else that we want to cover?
It's just so funny because when David was first proposing the podcast idea, Brad and I were like, what are we going to find time to talk about every week to do a 30-minute podcast? And like every time it's like we find 45 minutes of things to talk about. So we were wrong. We were wrong.
Well, I mean, like at least 5 minutes was coffee talk today. So, I mean, we did pad that a little bit. Like, but yeah. Brad, anything else on your mind before we move into week ahead? If not,
I had a mild panic attack when we were talking about growing the team this year. And like, what are we going to do with the podcast? We will not have time to cover everything in 30 minutes. Like, what is our plan going to be? So we'll have to, have a really intense discussion about podcast agenda.
We'll do Friday, Wednesday, Monday, Friday, Wednesday, one day, Wednesday, Friday. I think we just do three episodes a week, right? We're just kidding. We're not going to do that. Okay, moving on. Week ahead, I will start. Next week is going to be pretty action-packed. We've got Las Vegas Travel Agent Forum. So it's myself, Ellen, and Dylan are flying to Las Vegas. This is always kind of one of the more fun events. It's like 1,000+ advisors. I'd say pretty good mix, but it skews to people who are maybe a little bit newer to the industry. which is always just a fun opportunity for us to kind of get in front of people who are making decisions on systems, or maybe they're deciding to start their own agency and go independent. This is where we met Chloe for the first time last year. And so it's just a special event, and we've got a lot going on. We've got on Monday part of a panel on just kind of technology and automation right away. Then we go into kind of an event that we're hosting, kind of a smaller community event for Tern users and friends. And so if you're interested in that, you can find it under the events tab on our website. If you are attending, or if you're just in the Las Vegas area, you're also welcome to stop by. Then we've got a presentation that we're doing, kind of like teasing some of these new AI features and doing a demo of Tern. We go right into, I think, 10 hours or something like that of expo hall time. So it's going to be a really action-packed week. And then visiting a customer on site. It's going to a kind of a larger host agency on Thursday. And so it's a action-packed week for me from a kind of travel, sales, marketing side of things, and just really excited because this event has always been really fun for us. So that's my week. Let's see, Molly, do you want to kick off? What are you thinking about next week?
Yes, and I'll say half the things so I don't take all of Brad's. So we're not done with forms. We are shipping, I think maybe the update people are most excited about for forms, which is getting rid of having to require the cover page with the responder form element, saving the best for last. And also just sequencing wise, we actually needed a few of the pieces from earlier projects to do this well. So that'll be really exciting. Will be, all the things, testing, launching, documentation for that. And hopefully fielding some really hype comments in the Facebook group and from support when we finally launch it. And then we are starting writing code for our signature integration, which will be really exciting. We're targeting the end of April for that. And, of course, like Tern, trying to get some earlier versions available for beta testing ahead of that. So that'll be great. And I think we're actually also going to be starting writing some of our first invoicing code. So another big milestone. We talked about invoicing before. We'll talk about it more next week, but yeah, it won't be releasing next week, but we'll be starting development on that.
Busy. And that was half the things. So Brad,
Half the things.
over to you.
I'm not sure if it was half the things. It might have been most of them. I'm going to we're working on
invoicing. Save invoicing for Brad, and then I mentioned invoicing. So I think I took 2/3 of the things.
It's all good. We're running a little long, but we're also working on AI. We'll talk about it a lot more next week. Tune in again, and maybe there'll be some new AI things live within the next week or so.
Some Easter eggs, some surprises, if you will. So, awesome. Well, thank you as always for tuning in to Flight Path, where, as you just heard, we have some fun. We talk about what we shipped. We give you a little bit of sneak peek and what's coming up. It is your place for all things Tern news, especially when it kind of comes to the product and everything that we're building. At the end of the day, we are building this for you, the Tern community, by listening, learning, really understanding what the challenges are, and shipping updates every single week to make Tern better so that you can grow your business. And that's what we're all about. So thanks for tuning in. If you like this, click on the subscribe button. Click the notification button so you get notified when these go live every Friday afternoon, and leave us a comment. And we will see you in the next episode. Thanks all.
Bye.